The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. Bro, I gotta watch it. We haven't done one of these in a while, have we? So this is from the Lex Fridman podcast, a podcast that I particularly like myself. I think Lex is an excellent interviewer and often has fascinating guests. Of course, you'll find I won't react to the whole thing because it would take me a week. Therefore, today we're going to just see a few things, see if we agree, disagree, add something, usual stuff that we do. And then, if you like what you see, do click the link in the description or pinned comment to go finish watching the entire video. And without further ado.
We're talking about a society that was right in the middle of one of the main corridors of empire building and new religions in the world. This is the most dangerous neighborhood that you can possibly live in.
26 emperors were murdered in a period of 50 years.
Yes. It's tremendous instability.
Almost all of these emperors were generals, and almost all were murdered by their men. So civil war was the norm, hyperinflation, economic crash, plus there's a plague.
Yes.
It's just a lot of chaos.
Here's why I don't think the Eastern Roman Empire is a military dictatorship, even though, again, the emperors control the armies, and the armies themselves will often have a say in who becomes emperor, like through the civil wars that we mentioned. The reason why I don't think it's a military dictatorship is because they almost never, very, very, very rarely use the army as an instrument of social control. Sometimes these eunuchs are...
Man, I'm looking, usually this is the highlight, right? That's why I'm not talking. I want to let the highlight play.
Extremely competent. Like Narcissus, Justinian's general, who defeated the Goths in Italy in this massive battle. Like, this guy was a total hard-ass. And he was this little old man. He was very...
The image looks a bit like Oblivion, doesn't it?
He was very old. He was tiny, and he was a eunuch. And the Goths laughed at him, but he had the last laugh.
Lex Fridman podcast.
The following is a conversation with Anthony Caldelis, a historian of the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire. This is the Lex Fridman podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description, where you can also find links to contact me, ask questions, give feedback, and so on. And now, dear friends, here's Anthony Caldelis.
Well, let's go. Byzantine, vitamin, direction, civilization, dynasty, minotaur. How many more can I come up with?
You've described that the Byzantine Empire is the Roman Empire, that calling it the Byzantine Empire is an invention of historians writing long after the empire has collapsed, that the people of that time considered themselves Romans, and that the so-called Byzantine Empire never actually existed, that it was, in every legal and cultural sense, the Roman Empire,
Eastern,
continuing unbroken. So, let's get our terms right in the grand historical context. What is the Byzantine Empire, and why should we just call it the Roman Empire?
So, Lex, the burden of proof is on those who would assert that what we've been calling the Byzantine Empire is something other than the Roman Empire, because all of our sources are very clear about this. And we've known about this. We've always known about it. It's almost a form of cognitive dissonance, right? It's like when you know something is the case, but you carry on as if it's not. So the Eastern Roman Empire, this is the direct continuation.
Man, we are starting with a strong claim
Of the ancient Roman Empire in the East, right? Everybody knows the Western Empire fell in the 5th century. And for many conceptions of Western history, that was sufficient. Like, that's when we just called it. The Roman Empire fell in the 5th century. And we kind of know that the Eastern half survived, but we don't want to include that in our cultural genealogy. And so we kind of pretend that it became something else. But in fact, it called itself the Roman Empire. Its
called itself is irrelevant, but it does have a point.
Subjects were Roman citizens. They called themselves Romans all the way down through to the end and beyond.
I think the critique that you could then mount is, right, but they're not Italian Romans. So who's more Roman? Right? Because if they are Romans and they are the actual continuation of the Roman Empire without Rome, this is, I think, why it becomes a matter of discussion and nomenclature. Are they Roman citizens? Yes, as long as we consider Rome to still be a thing. So really, I think to address this empirically, we would have to first define what do you mean by Rome, right? But can Rome, as an idea, as a political system, continue even without the city of Rome itself? Or is it like a snake whose head has been cut. Yeah, the rest of the body is present, still moving, but the head is gone. And does the citizenship mean anything without the capital city being part of it? I think it's a reasonable question to ask because it enters the space of linguistics and definitions. Not to mention the Greek language taking over Latin, so the language is different.
So there are a number of reasons why Western Europeans wanted to think that the Eastern Empire is something different. And those reasons have created these models where they called it Empire of the Greeks for 1,000 years, then they switched to Byzantine Empire for very political reasons. Now that's collapsing. So we're now moving into a phase where we have the long Roman Empire. We recognize that the history of the Roman state, the Roman polity, is something that lasts an extraordinarily long time, very unique almost in history, from antiquity, like the archaic period, down to the 15th century.
I think it would be really nice to actually look just for a brief moment at the grand scale of the full Roman state as it lasted for over 2,200 years.
Yeah.
So its founding, 753 BC.
Traditional.
To, let's say, the fall of Constantinople in 1453 AD. So can we try to give a big picture overview?
Appreciate the man using BC AD, by the way. You know, for the people that keep insisting and pestering us with BCE CE, BCE CE, brother, you have the freedom to do it, and I have the freedom to cringe. But I've also decided to not just stick to cringing alone, but in fact to combat it. Meaning, not only that I will always say BC AD, and you will never find me dead saying BCE CE, but I've actually stepped it up. I don't even say AD anymore. I actually say Anno Domini Nostri Jesu Christi, Deus Vult. How about that?
You have everything that happened.
Okay, so first we have a period of the kings. This is almost legendary from like the 8th century BC down to around 510 BC. So this is when Rome is ruled by a series of local kings.
Yes.
The kings are expelled, and the republic, or what we call the republic, is instituted. And
some of those kings weren't even Roman. You think about it, like they were Etruscan.
This is a regime that's governed by mostly an aristocracy, but with cooperation from the people of Rome. In various ways, the arrangements change over the centuries. So that lasts for about 5 centuries. And then we have the end of the Republic in the era of Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar, when the civil wars lead to the creation of an imperial monarchy, right, under Augustus. So we date that roughly either 27 BC, something like that. And thereafter, it is an imperial monarchy for the next millennium and a half.
You know, oftentimes when describing modern forms of governance, of course, we use ancient terms. We say republic from res publica, it's a Latin term, and we say democracies from demokratia in ancient Greek. But what's interesting is that even though these terms are ancient, our modern democracies and modern republics, they're not exactly the same as the ancient ones. The models are similar. But if we're looking and operating through similarity alone, then I would say that American governance is closer to the Roman Republic than it is to Greek democracy, because the form of Greek democracy was a form of pure democracy. The Roman Republic was representative. Basically, that means, just said it very quickly, is that in democracies, there is usually a larger number of people that contribute not only to voting, but they contribute to policy making, whereas in a republic, the people vote their representatives, but then it's the representatives that decide the policies, not the people. And that's indeed closer to, so I think modern America is closer to the Roman Republic as a Roman Republican system. But what's interesting is that democracies are ancient. I personally think, and that's just my opinion, I can go into it if needed, but I think democracies are prehistoric as a concept, meaning that while tribalism, so early Neolithic and Mesolithic, maybe up to a certain point, because of course in the Mesolithic period and Paleolithic we have hunter-gatherer societies, and then so you have your tribes, and these tribes have chieftains, so it's a form of despotism, maybe you could say, and then some of those tribal ruling systems will naturally morph into monarchies. But believe it or not, it's actually been studied that some of those were actually extended into proto-democracies before they ended up forming early monarchies. So proto-democracies are an ancient, even more ancient than the monarchies as systems, which I find fascinating.
Very broadly, we can divide that into 2 phases, one where the center of power is in Rome, and one where it's in Constantinople.
Yeah.
And We can debate the dates of when that transition takes place. These big transitions usually take place over long periods of time. They're not like very sudden.
Interestingly enough, Constantinople, which is modern day Istanbul, changed and built over Byzantium, which is why you say Byzantine or Byzantine.
So that's the big picture. Kings, republic,
Yeah.
imperial monarchy.
The Roman Kingdom, the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire.
Yes.
And then the West and East Roman Empire.
Yes.
And then maybe what are the different terms that we could be using for the Byzantine Empire, including Byzantium? Is it also fair to say the late Roman Empire?
So late Roman Empire we use for both East and West, starting around the reign of Diocletian, maybe even a bit earlier. So during the 3rd century,
The dominant.
AD, and that goes down to maybe the early 7th century. So that period we call late Roman Empire. And if you ask me to define its principal characteristics, it would probably be the tax system and the administration, the bureaucracy of the later Roman Empire is that comes from mostly Diocletian and Constantine's reforms.
And Diocletian was in the 3rd century.
Yes, 284 to 305 AD. Yes, it's a very important reformer.
And we'll talk about it, but let's just do this whirlwind, and hopefully there'll be automagical images somewhere overlaid. But
okay,
so in 753 BC, Rome, a small city-state, is founded, and in 509 BC, the kings are overthrown, and the Roman Republic is born. 390 BC, the Gauls sack Rome, and this, I believe, among other events throughout it.
It's a nice picture, but this type of armor, which appears to be it's the lorica segmentata, was not in use in 390 BC. So maybe for the person who's picking your pictures, tell them that unless it's the Roman Empire or the very end of the Republic, I'm talking the last 20 years, then it would be better if they have the Romans dressed in mail. Or lorica gallica, lorica hamata, however you want to call it. I prefer the term gallica because we know they used it. Hamata, coming from hamus, the link, the ring, is a modern neologism, but we do know that they copied it from the Gauls anyways, from Celtic models. They should be wearing mail.
History is a formative trauma that hardens Rome's security obsession. It turns out throughout its history, people want to attack from different directions, and so you have to defend. Yes. So there's 2 wars, as we're actually saying off mic, there's 2 kinds of military operations. One is wars of conquest and expansion, and one is more defensive. And we'll talk about how the military changes throughout its history.
And it's interesting because those 2 models are represented by 2 different gods. You got Ares for the offensive warfare or warfare in general, and you've got Athena for defensive warfare.
To allocate more effort to one versus the other. In 264 to 146 BC, the Punic Wars and the survival against Hannibal transformed Rome into a Mediterranean superpower. Then, like you mentioned, Caesar.
Clash of Titans.
In 49 to 31 BC, Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon to assassination of Caesar to the Battle of Actium, and then the Civil War dismantles the Republic and concentrates power in a single ruler, Octavian, aka Augustus.
Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus Augustus. This is with the correct phonemic vowel length.
The first Roman emperor,
my favorite.
Say. Yeah.
So for this image, I'm going to nitpick a little bit. His hair should have been lighter. Some people think blonde, maybe dirty blonde. I would go between light brown and dirty blonde. His eyes either blue or gray, if you want to follow the way he's represented in the sources.
27 BC, Augustus founds the Principate, really low-key monarchy. And so officially that ends the Republic, and then that begins 27 BC to 180 AD, the Pax Romana, which is a period of relative peace and stability. And a lot of the emperors we know of, the sexy popular emperors, come from that period.
Yes.
Marcus Aurelius.
The sexy popular emperor.
I'm a big fan of from that period. Then that takes us to 284 AD, the guy we mentioned, Diocletian, who rebuilds the state. Emperors drop the first citizen mask. This perception of the way, and we'll talk about this, the persona that's presented by the state. 312 AD, Constantine defeats Maxentius at the Milvia Bridge to become the sole ruler of the western half of the empire, and then founds Constantinople in 330 AD. East and west are split in 395 AD. Visigoths sack Rome in 410 AD. The west falls at 476 AD. As the last Western emperor is deposed. And then we sort of focus more on the East Roman Empire with 527 in the 6th century, Justinian's reign. In the 7th century, Heraclius defeats Persia and then loses against the Arabs.
So one thing, before he continues, there are two things that I want to say. Thing number one, you did not mention the best emperor. Come on, man. Come on. Come on, man. I expected better than you. Look at that. Look at it. Look at it. From 17 to 68 AD. Huh? On a separate note, not too long ago, I actually made this list, which is a list of the Roman emperors that we have from the 1st to the 86th in 476 AD. So, of course, this is all the way up to the fall of the Western Roman Empire, if you will. And what's interesting is that I marked in red the ones that were Italian Romans. So it's a lot of them. In red, I've indicated every emperor who was born in Italy. In blue, every emperor who was born outside of Europe, even though some of these still come from an Italian colonial family. Green indicates all the emperors that were still born in Europe, outside of Italy, but still in Europe. Once you dig into the actual sources, you'll see that Europe remains categorically the main contributor here. This was like to discuss this idea of how international the Roman Empire was, right, but still, when it comes to the leadership, mostly European.
There's the Arab conquest continuing in the 7th century. In the 8th, the Arab siege of Constantinople fails. There's the Macedonian dynasty that you have an excellent book about. And then the Crusades, and then eventually leading to Constantinople falling in 1453 AD. As a person who understands the full journey of it with a focus on East Roman history, is there obvious glaring holes or incorrect things in what I just said?
No, nothing incorrect. I would say if you wanted to produce a sort of very swift timeline of its history, it's obviously important to focus on the moments when lots of territory was lost to foreign invaders. And these are actually three main moments. There's the Arab conquests in the 630s. This is a decade. In a decade, that war was lost. It is the Seljuk Turk conquest of Asia Minor, modern Turkey, in the 1070s. And that was very swift and partly reversed afterwards, but only partly. And then there's the Fourth Crusade, 1204, when the armies from mostly France conquer Constantinople and dismember the empire as much as they could. It didn't last that long. The Romans managed to regroup and recover. But those are the three...
It is interesting that he keeps saying Romans. I mean, he's sticking to his principles.
Main crisis points. They are very swift, but they cause incredible damage. For all the rest of its history, it is a state and society that is generally sort of consolidating, regrouping, and generally engaged in slow but steady economic growth, territorial expansion, a small scale but steady.
Clearly, he's generalizing. I wonder if he's going to go into the outbreaks of disease.
So we can talk about this. I think it's an important thing to keep in mind about the big picture, that the defeats were swift and kind of terrible, but the most of its history is one of slow growth.
There's some traumatic events that have a big impact, but a lot of the developments we'll talk about, it might seem or feel like there's a particular moment when those developments or changes in the way the government or the military is structured arise, but really it's a gradual process. And
exactly.
So that's the tension we have to be constantly dancing with.
Yeah, so as historians, this is a point of method, and it's very important. There are moments when individuals with a great deal of power make choices that impact everybody else and have long-term consequences downstream.
I would say one of these. Let's see if he's going to say the same, but clearly the adoption of the Christian religion as a state religion, it is massive. Massive. When I talk about butterfly effect,
Constantine's conversion to Christianity.
There you go.
Long-term consequences downstream.
yes,
Constantine's conversion to Christianity, for example.
the
Right.
dream.
Not something that anybody could have or did predict. Okay. Otherwise, most of the developments that we identify by specific dates, like you mentioned 395, the division of the Eastern and the Western empires, those are conventional dates that we use to actually capture what is in fact a much longer process. There was no split between the two halves. It was one among many allocations of jurisdiction to like one son and another son in the East and the West. The two halves were subsequently reunited. Then they kind of divided again among different emperors. It's just a process. And so we sometimes use fixed dates for what is in fact a process. Or for 76, the fall of the Western Empire.
Yeah.
This is the last date. It's actually a very long process
course,
that
of
took
course.
decades. Right? So that's just something to keep in mind, that sometimes they're talking about processes, sometimes they're talking about very discrete events with...
It's kind of funny because when people discuss the fall of the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire, and then we try to figure out a single reason for it, that's when I think the situation becomes too superficial. And then any answer you give is not going to be sufficient in any way. And in fact, it's going to unfortunately obfuscate the truth. Because the thing is, when the Roman Empire falls, people oftentimes, it's a process just like that. It takes a lot of time to really understand the multiple factors that led to its fall. And what's interesting is that we've had people point to things that are real, such as, for instance, foreign invasions, and we could say immigration if you want to look at it, but it's definitely not the only reason. And when you look at I wouldn't even put it as the main reason. Not only it's not the only one, but it is a factor, and absolutely is a factor, but it's not the only thing. Had that been the only factor, I don't think it would have fallen. And then you have other reasons, which is like it fell because of the gays, which is kind of makes me laugh, to be honest. Also because, I mean, if you really want to say, oh, it's the gays that corrupted the empire, right, but when it fell, it was Christian. So if anything, there were less gays around. Not that there were less gay people, but definitely there were less openly gay people. But in general, this idea that the Romans and the Greeks were all gay is ridiculous. It was still a minority we're talking about, including in classical antiquity, and this is absolutely factual. No, the Roman Empire did not fall because of the gays. No, I think if I had to, it's a multi-layered process, but if I had to choose a single word, I would say inner corruption. It's not a single word, it's two words. Corruption, then. I think it's corruption of the authorities, which then led that's the core, the catalyst, and what did that cause? Well, the result is mass discontent. And I think these two things were the major things, together with immigration and together with other situations that are interesting to look at.
long-term consequences. Yeah.
Maybe an impossible question for a Roman state that lasted over 2,200 years, but is there a kind of through line, a thread, a soul that runs through the entire history of the Roman Empire? As you said, it's a slow transformation and evolution. But if we dare call the whole thing Rome, the Roman state,
Yes.
is there some aspects, some characteristics that run through the whole thing?
I think so, yes. By the way, you know the metaphor of the ship of Theseus? Okay, so in case the audience doesn't know it, this is when there's a ship and it's, at sea. And over time, like every component of that ship is replaced with some other component. So
I can see one thing replaced right there. You went for CE.
that by the end of the story, it has none of the original parts, but
Right.
it's like in a certain sense still that ship because of the story, right? Okay. So Roman history is different from, let's say, Greek history or Christian.
Let me say one thing, though. It's interesting. I wonder what you're going to use it as a metaphor. What is the wood then? The ethnic makeup? Regardless of that, the ship at the end is a different ship, though. That's no questions asked. It is a different ship. The only question is, and that's the philosophical aspect of it, when does it become a different ship? Is it at the placement of the very last blank? Or does it happen somewhere in between? Does it happen when there is more than 50% that has been replaced? Is it at 80%? Or is it because, of course, if you have a ship and you just lose a nail, that's not a different ship. When does it stop being the same ship? That's the philosophical matter. But there is no question that it's a different ship. So if you use that as an analogy, Professor, that the problem is that the Eastern Roman Empire is not Roman. It's a different empire now. If we really want to go play logically with the analogy.
Christian history, right? Christian history is the story of a religion. It can be in any country, among any ethnic group. It's here,
Yes.
there, right? It's
Right.
everywhere. But you still have histories of Christianity.
Yes.
It's the same with, like, say, Greek culture or your Greek literature, right? It's not a function of a particular state. Ancient Greeks were famously never united in a state. But it's people who culturally accept that tradition
And ethnically. Let's not forget the ethnicity component.
as their kind of elite prestige culture and engage with Homer and Plato and so forth. And they can be anywhere. Roman history is not like that. Roman history is very specifically the history of a state or a political community. And so this is the community of the Roman people, the Roman citizens. And it is in gradual evolution, but at no point is there a rupture in that history such that its members would ever think that something dramatic had changed and that they're no longer part of that story. So in the same way as the ship I just mentioned, in other words, it's the narrative that you tell about it where the changes that take place to it make sense only when you see them within the context of that story. It's the same with Roman history. Yes, there are changes. Like, eventually everything changes, but it happens so gradually that it doesn't seem that way to anyone living in it.
That's a good point.
And so
interesting.
The narrative of the history of the Roman people is what holds all of this together.
How important is it that, so you mentioned Greek culture. So a lot of my friends who are Greek are extremely proud of being Greek.
They should be.
There's certain cultures that are proud.
Sure.
And it's not a momentary, ephemeral thing. It feels like a thing that has lasted for many generations.
Oh, yeah.
And so that is an engine that propagates through time that carries that culture forward. And so does a similar thing apply for the Roman Empire in a different way? Maybe because you say it's a political kind of community. That means a set of ideals. And we'll talk about, because those ideals become even more concretized and explicit, I think, through the East Roman Empire, because one of the things you talk about is that the citizens of the empire are kind of all connected, that they are engaged in this whole sort of machinery. Anyway, that's a complicated way of asking. Is there some elements that Greek pride that I speak? Is there some kind of Roman pride that propagates the thing?
Oh, there totally is. You can find authors and historical agents who definitely display this or talk about it. But we don't want to make that the center of the story or the basis for any analysis, because so what you're observing in your Greek friends is also the result of modern nation building, it's the result of modern systems of education and sort of national identities, and these are fostered and created through all kinds of media and institutions. It's just a different situation altogether. What you find
altogether, I mean, I agree with him, but ancient Greeks, even though they were separated by different city-states, they still had a common Hellenes identity when it came to enemies. So when they're fighting the Persians, we're all Greeks. That was a thing, even though they didn't have a modern state or modern nationalism, if you will. That was still a thing, cultural and ethnic. That's why I say that. Racial, cultural, linguistic. These are the three things that create ethnicity.
In ancient republics or medieval states is more something like a consensus to be ruled, to rule and to be ruled in this particular political community. Now, some members of it may definitely, and in fact did have this kind of pride. I'll give you an example. So there's an ambassador in the 6th century, and he's concluding a deal with the Persians.
Fun.
And, the Persians are skeptical because the Romans can't always be trusted. But this guy says to them, he says, and let me just tell you, you're making a deal here with the Romans. The Romans, the name should say it all. And you get a sense that this is expressing a certain pride in like being a bearer of the Roman tradition and speaking for the emperors and the Roman Empire. I mean, that's for him, this was something very, very momentous.
Cool.
You find these kinds of examples. So these people exist, but I wouldn't want to make that the basis for like an analysis of how the society works as a whole.
Sure.
For the most part, it was something like a consensus where subjects or citizens, however you want to call them, they agree to, let's say, be taxed and be ruled by political authorities because of what they get in return. And there's this kind of understanding of a mutual set of responsibilities.
Such a good guest.
And my concern, among other things, is to try to explain how this society held together for so long. Pride, yes, among some people, definitely. You find it in the sources, but the sources are texts that are written by literate, usually elites. So this is a small part of the population. We can't automatically extend their attitudes to everybody else.
Which is why when people say, by extension, the ancient Greeks were all gay, and they base it on sources, not all of them being like, I know this has nothing to do with it, but then again, it's important to underline that whenever we read sources, we shouldn't apply that sentiment that we're reading to the entirety of the population. I know it sounds obvious. It really isn't, particularly to some people.
So in dealing with everyone else, we have to work with different kinds of materials, different kinds of assumptions. We can't just posit that they're just proud of being Roman. They could have been. We don't know that, though. We can see other sorts of things about them. Like, for example, did they pay their taxes? Did they try to rebel and leave the empire? So those are the kinds of things that I look for.
Pride is one component, but there could be other explanations and factors that explain what motivates a soldier to defend the capital, for example.
Yeah.
Like what motivates a particular person to pay the taxes. And then this is something that we'll definitely talk about. But just to linger at the big picture, if the Romans from the different periods met, how different would they be from each other? Like if I brought to you, this is one of those, there's like a blind taste test you can do with food.
Yes. Pepsi and Coke.
Pepsi and Coke.
Yes.
If I brought you a Roman from the kingdom period, the Republic period, the early imperial period.
I mean, I get asked this in a much more radical form, which is like if you take someone from like around 1453 who's a Roman and a subject of this Roman and compare him or have him meet, in your imagination with someone from the ancient Republic, like how could they find any kind of agreement on what it means to be Roman and recognize each other as belonging to that polity? This is a very difficult thing to now. I can point to a number of things that they would find eventually. And, if you told them, you're both Romans, you're both...
That is, if it can communicate.
From this long history, now you have to find, what you have in common. I think they could find things. But before we talk about those, if you want to get into it, let's just say that the question can even be posed about Romans who live at the same time. I mean, if you take a senator from the age of Cicero and someone from the slums of Rome, who's maybe the son of a slave who was brought from the East by some general a generation ago, and put them in a room and say, now you discuss, you're both Romans, what do you have in common? They might have trouble in coming up with something.
Yeah, but a lot less, let's be honest. That's a status, that's a caste, wealth. But it would be... I don't think this is a pertinent example, because if you have a modern American, two modern Americans, and one is poor and one is rich, but they're both Americans, they are Americans, all right? So they may have different political ideas. Maybe they belong to the same party, who knows? But the differences don't unmake them American. But if you take an American now and you compare it to someone who was from here, for instance, before the Europeans even arrived, this is a completely different race, ethnicity, language, like the cultures are, okay? Even though you could say that, well, but there are Native Americans today, but they are American citizens. Like, it's very different. I don't know if the two things could really be used that way.
So let's not minimize the sheer diversity of experiences and sort of life experiences of Romans who are living at the same time.
You know why I think this is not apt? Because then you could say that about everything. Oh, well, then an Asian, an African, a Native American, a European, a Swedish, a Sicilian. Yeah, they're all at the end of the day, they're all equidistant, because you can find two people from the same area who live very different lives. It doesn't work.
The important thing is that change is always happening. And from my standpoint, this change is sort of cumulative, so it results in a Greek-speaking Orthodox Christian
There we go.
Romans
Yeah.
in Constantinople, who at first sight might have little to do with Latin-speaking, non-Christians or worshiping the ancient gods, Romans from a republic in Rome, and those are very, very different situations. And no doubt they would look and seem foreign to each other, right?
Yes.
The question
also because the past is a foreign land. So if you liked this, please let me know in the comments and like the video, share it, subscribe, and all the rest. Because if this video, if it doesn't do well, then that's it. But if it does really well and you keep telling me, no, please make part 2, I'll make part 2. I've done this in the past. It kind of depends on video performance. So if you liked it, do leave multiple comments and share it, and then we'll see how it goes. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you, Lex Friedman, as usual, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.